Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. It's time for another Q&A with the IBFP. So we're just going to break down you guys' questions and get right into it. The first question comes from Tony Perez, and he states, who's a better boxer, Mikey Garcia or Canelo Alvarez? And I have to undoubtedly give this to Canelo Alvarez. Even if Canelo Alvarez was outmatched by a better boxer, you have to give him the credit that he would make adjustments. Even in the Floyd Mayweather fight, Canelo made adjustments. They just weren't successful. So you have to give Canelo Alvarez the credit for being able to make adjustments regardless of who he is in the ring with. Mikey Garcia just simply did not make any adjustments, didn't show to have a plan B or C against, Errol Spence. And that's just not something that you would expect from an elite level, top level fighter. I'm still a little bit surprised that Mikey, just didn't have the game plan. Didn't matter if he won or lost. Simply mattered is that you need to be able to make adjustments to try to counter your opponent, and I didn't see that. I seen Mikey Garcia did do some very good things. At some points he backed up Errol Spence. At points when he decided to get aggressive, but ultimately waiting and looking for the perfect shot, not letting your hands go, not using angles, not using lateral movement. All these things were key in his defeat against Errol Spence Jr. He has a good chin, and Errol Spence Jr. power isn't as crushing as many people thought. So this was a winnable fight. He just had the poor and improper game plan. Credit to Errol Spence Jr. for getting the win, but I think that Canelo Alvarez has shown levels of skill above Mikey Garcia in all of his fights, and I think that Canelo Alvarez will take another level and another step to showing his skill against another elite opponent in Danny Miracleman Jacobs. So right now I have to pick Canelo Alvarez as being the better pure boxer. Great question. And the next question comes from Randy C. How likely do you think Wilder versus AJ will be given next if they win their next fights? I think because of Deontay's loyalty to Heyman and Showtime, he'll probably fight White next and rematch Ortiz before AJ. They're great fights, but not the fight that we want at the moment. Also, do you think... Well, let's start with that. I don't think that AJ Wilder happens next because Wilder's still demanding 50-50. Wilder doesn't want to make it about the belt. Wilder turned down a $100 million deal. So in his mind, he thinks he's making logical moves when really they're insanity. You have to look at it like this, that Deontay Wilder, if he's turning down a guaranteed $100 million, something that he's never even dreamed of making in the sport of boxing, but then you turn around and you demand 50-50 from a global superstar in boxing when you're not even known in America. What does that say about this guy's understanding of reality and in the situation that he's currently in, the risk he's putting himself in? Because fighting, lower level competition, thinking that he's just going to steamroll these guys. Because if he gets caught with a good shot, the entire gravy train is over. You're not going to make $100 million in your next 3 fights, regardless of who you fight, if it's not Anthony Joshua. So why not take the guaranteed money? He say, well, Anthony Joshua may not have been included on the contract. We all know he was, but even if he wasn't, you're still not going to make $100 million fighting any other 3 opponents. Why wouldn't you take the guaranteed money? It makes absolutely zero sense, and it's a clear duck move from Deontay Wilder. I just don't think that they're going to get a fight made anytime this year. I think anytime that they'd have an opportunity to get a fight made potentially will be sometime next year, and that's just being honest as I can. Randy C. also states, do you think Wilder can really call himself the free agent and his own boss? Absolutely not. He can't, because he's being navigated and directed by Shelley Finkel and Al Heyman, which clearly state that they're not going to let this guy come into any negotiation with an open mind of really trying to make a fight, because even if he wasn't satisfied with the $100 million deal, the great deal that was offered to him, they never even made a counter offer. So based on that alone shows that Deontay Wilder's not his own boss, not his own man. There's no way that you decline that type of opportunity without at least a counter offer. But that's just being honest and unbiased. Next question comes from D3440. Do you think Naoya Inoue will walk through the WBSS, the World Boxing Super Series, bantamweight like cake, because the dude just entered the weight class and all of them have been first round knockouts? I actually do. I think he's an elite fighter. I think he's probably the most bruising fighter that I've seen in a long time, with skill, power, pop, everything. He seems to have all of the attributes that you look for in a top level, elite level fighter. And I'll put it like this: Naoya Inoue, I think he runs through the World Boxing Super Series without a sweat. But that's just my opinion. Great question. Next question comes from Sergio Marafo. Keith Thurman versus Errol Spence without being unbiased and saying, oh, Errol Spence is a monster and dumb stuff like that. Keep it real. Only because I think it'll be a great fight, closer than what people think. I'll say, though, I believe Crawford beats both of them. Just my opinion. And I appreciate your opinion, and I'll be 100% unbiased in my analysis of this. I think that if Keith Thurman gets a couple more tune-ups and is back to the old Keith Thurman that we saw in years prior, before the injury, I'll say that Keith Thurman could possibly beat Errol Spence Jr. I think Keith Thurman's skill for skill is better than Errol Spence Jr. But I would pick Errol Spence Jr. because I've seen more from him lately, and I've seen less from Keith. So Keith has to make me believe that he's able to get this win against, Errol Spence Jr. Keith has to make me believe that he can survive, because when you were almost knocked out, by Josecito Lopez, that does not make me feel like you can beat an Errol Spence. He will need at least 2 more tune-ups at the very least to try to be halfway back right to where he needs to be able to compete at the level of an Errol Spence Jr. Great question. The next one comes in at the One True Phobia. I know you're a boxing head at all, but do you watch MMA at all? If so, what's your opinion? Who do you think to be the best MMA fighter right now to transition into professional boxing? That's a lot of guys. I don't really watch too much MMA, but I will say we're a boxing fan, boxing channel, boxing people. But I'll say this, is that I think Conor McGregor has potential, depending on what weight he settles in. I'd really like to see Conor versus, Paulie Malignaggi, especially simple to the fact that, Conor McGregor is retired from MMA. So that's one fight to look for. That's one scenario that I'd like to see happen. Great question. Next question comes from Maldonado S. Do you think we'll ever see an undisputed middleweight champion? I think so, and I think Canelo could become that next undisputed middleweight champion. And the great thing about that is he could become that undisputed middleweight champion this year. Also, Maldonado S. states, I think as long as Wilder's champion, why won't we do PBC never fight cross-promotional fights? It seems like at this point PBC is bad for boxing. I agree. I don't think that PBC wants to match up with anyone. You see the Wilder AJ stuff is stalling because of the PBC. You see the Spence Crawford is stalling because of the PBC. You see the Tank Davis versus Tevin Farmer stalling because of the PBC. At one point, does the PBC do something more than stall out fights? That is becoming a major problem in the sport, and the PBC is going to have to start working with someone. Next question comes from Junior Estrella. He says, do you think British fighters are cheats? They're using oxylifrine, and it's legal in the UK. Oxylifrine gives you energy, increases power, speed, and helps you cut weight. I don't think they're cheaters, and this is why. Is because if you look at these guys, and what's legal in the US 1 minute may not be legal the next month. So you could start training camp using one thing, and you could end training camp and it's banned. And so just because the UK allows something, doesn't mean it's a bad substance or anything like that, or makes you a cheater. These things vary from commission to commission. There's not one overall governing body that covers the UK and US. But I will say this, if you're a fighter and you have a concern about one of these type of substances, what you need to do is put it in a contract, put it in writing, and and say, hey, we only use this, we only do this, and these are my stipulations. If you're the A side, if you're not, you're able to use the same substance if you're fighting on that soil, and that means it's an even fight. So it really doesn't matter at this point, because both guys would have an equal opportunity if they fought in the UK to use those substances. But that's not saying every British fighter uses those substances. But that's a great question. Eduardo Sanchez says, Canelo versus David Benavidez at 168. Who you got? I have to pick Canelo Alvarez. He's an elite fighter. He's proven. But I think David Benavidez is a special talent, and he's going to be a real problem for 168 pounds for years to come. He is a very, very intriguing prospect. Outstrike 30 states, I like your channel, but with all due respect, I don't think any boxer is a tomato can, because anyone that steps in the ring is risking their lives, no matter who it is, should be respected for getting into the ring. Much love, bro. I appreciate that, Outstrike 30. And I will tell you this, no fighter is a tomato can as far as being, and disrespectful. When you say tomato can, it's just a term, a figure of speech, I'll rather say, as far as the level that they are in boxing, because we have to be honest and unbiased about how good or bad they are. And yes, every fighter gets respect. Every fighter is risking their lives for our entertainment. So we appreciate all fighters. We respect all fighters, but that's just terminology, brother. Let's keep going. Dragon Led states, should Terence Crawford join DAZN? Would Bob Arum associate with Eddie Hearn to help Crawford get good fights? I think, Terence Crawford going into DAZN is meaningless at this point, and there's two reasons why. One, he has the biggest audience he can get in ESPN at the moment as far as a welterweight. Two, DAZN has no welterweights, and they had Jesse Vargas, but he's moving to 154. They have Kell Brook, but we don't, he's not the same, and he's not a champion. So I don't know what fight Eddie would be able to help Terence Crawford get on DAZN, because the PBC pretty much has all the welterweights. And the ones that they don't have, Top Rank has. So it's really up to Al Heyman and the PBC to work with Top Rank to make the best fights, and everyone else can be done in the house. But I don't think anything like that else would happen. But once again, this concludes part 1 of the Q&A with the IBFP. Please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.